What's the difference between these two throwers here? On the left, we have Corbin Burns. On the right, we have Sanchez from the catching position. What's similar, what's different, and how is throwing different between this and this? Welcome back to the channel. Max Wardell, overheadathletics.com, talking about position players versus pitchers and throwing mechanics. I tell people all the time, throwing is throwing and pitching is throwing. So what's the difference between pitching and throwing from the field? Well, I'm gonna focus first on what's the same, and then we'll look at how things are different and why they're different. First, we see that things happen very similarly from the field and from the mound. A guy who came in from shortstop doesn't throw uniquely differently off the mound than he did from shortstop or from the outfield. So the idea that you need different throwing mechanics from the field versus the mound is not completely accurate. Let's look at that a little bit more here. So let's look at what we call attractors. Now I don't want to dive too deep down the rabbit hole here, but attractor is basically a state that an organism or a system will migrate towards over time. It's kind of a point of stability or a stable point in a movement, in a throw, in a system. With that in mind, we see similar attractors among multiple movements and among multiple sports. That's why your shortstop, when he comes in to pitch, he doesn't throw that different. And really, he shouldn't. There are some things that'll change, and we'll talk about those towards the end of this video. And the reason that things remain similar is because movement can be highly coupled, meaning things happen together for specific reasons to keep the system in a stable alignment. And without getting too complex here, what I mean is certain things have to occur together and certain things can't occur together if you're to move at a high speed. We know that you can't do some crazy movement or some strange movement of your leg or shoulder and still end up moving fast. Certain muscles cross multiple joints, and therefore those joints have to move together in a certain fashion to be able to replicate a skill effectively. So we're not going to go into that in depth here, but based on our anatomy, we know that's true. The other thing here that we're going to see, and we're going to look at this specific attractor state a little bit more, is what we call approximation, or bringing things in close during acceleration or making your body go fast. You have to bring things in towards your center of rotation as you move quickly. So because we know that movements, certain movements have to occur with other movements, and we know that we have to abide by the laws of physics, we're going to see similarities from positions and from the mound. And the reason for that is we're built with one body that has certain characteristics, and we're trying to do very similar tasks. Throwing from the mound, if we look at that objectively, isn't so much of a different task as throwing from the field. So one thing you notice when I go through my landing there is something happens together. That's called knee flexion and hip flexion. It's a landing response. Those are coupled motions. So as I land, that motion's coupled. As I run, my hip flexes, my knee flexes. Once again, coupled motions. We have the same thing in our upper body with our triceps and with our lats, some of the connections with our bicep as well. We have to understand that certain motions have to kind of happen together, and that means that motions can't be totally different based on when I'm in the field versus on the mound, and we still have the same laws of physics applying, and that's why bringing the ball in close to our center of rotation as we come through is an extremely effective strategy that we see our catchers employ, our outfielders, our infielders, and our pitchers. How we get there can be a little bit different, and that is what we want to talk about here. What we'll notice when pitchers throw, they may do a plethora of different things to get to the top of the throw, but they mostly all get into this position where their arm is at a slight inclination here, but they're also bringing the ball in towards their head this way. You can see that here with Carlos Correa as he actually comes through the field. So he brings the ball right into that position, and that seems inherent for an infielder. But what about, say, Shane Bieber? If we watch, he does the exact same thing as he brings the ball in. That's no different from Sanchez, we saw from catcher in the beginning, as you can see here. And that's no different than, say, Corbin Burns, who we saw in the beginning, who brings the ball in close to his head. Those things remain similar from position to position. You can see the same thing with Tatis. As he fields the ball, he brings the ball in towards his center of rotation, so he approximates as he's accelerating, and then the ball goes out and around. We'll see that same thing off the mound with our best pitchers ever. So we see the same thing with Jacob deGrom. We've talked about in other videos. He brings the ball in close. This is a common trend we see even in Mike Trout from the outfield. Don't think that you need a longer arm action from the outfield. If you watch Trout, he's pretty compact and he throws extremely hard. And that's not just because he's a freak of nature. It's because he moves his body in the right way. We've all seen that big, muscly, strong guy who can't throw the ball very fast. That's not Trout. He takes the ball down, stays compact, brings it in close, just like we see in other sports. It's no different. Let's look at Jack Flaherty. When he throws, once again, short and compact, brings the ball in towards the center of rotation. Now, you may be able to get away with being a little bit longer and the ball a little bit further out, like say Garrett Cole, but he's still inside 90 degrees and his throw doesn't look too dissimilar from the rest of these guys. So you got to ask yourself, is it a different throwing mechanic from the mound versus the field, or is it the same mechanics with slightly different constraints placed on us by the task that we're performing? So off the mound, we have a slope that we're dealing with, but we also have a limited amount of ways we can potentially create linear momentum towards a target because we have to start from a static position on the rubber. On the field, we have the option of shuffling, crow hopping, and coming through a throw. If we have those options, we maybe don't need to lift our leg from the field and stride as far because we don't need to. We can crow hop to generate momentum as opposed to utilize a leg lift or stride a greater distance. I also have maybe more time to complete the throw as a pitcher. From the field, I'm very limited. I have to be from the glove to the target as fast as possible to get the runner out. In the outfield, maybe time isn't so important compared to the infield, so I have a little more time to use a longer arm action, a bigger crow hop, or those sorts of things. On the mound, I have a lot of time, so that's where guys get into positions where they can reach the ball back or rotate further through the hip that you can't do on the infield. So what's the difference? Is it that I'm using completely different skills to throw from the mound versus the field, or is it just that I have different constraints when I'm on the mound versus in the field? And I'm going to tell you, it's based on these constraints we're talking about, time and how I can generate momentum. Those two things are going to dictate the alterations in the throw. Yes, I have to spend time working on it. Yes, I have to practice from both of those two positions, pitching and the field, but also I may not need to just focus on the differences in the pitching mechanics. Rather, I need to focus on the things that are the same, which is the arm action, still how I turn and load my hip, where I get my arm to at the top of the throw, and then how I accelerate my arm through the throw, because we see that they're very similar, position players and pitchers. And that's why they can stay healthy, throw a high velocity, and be robust to injury over the course of a season. And that's the type of things you want to focus on with your mechanics, is what you can do the same, not what changes between the field and pitching. If you guys like this video, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Check out our online throwing programs as well as our corrective exercise program, overheadathletics.com. We will teach you how to transform your throw. Use a discount code in the description. We'll see you guys in those programs.